Cool. So yeah, we'll be discussing the first 7 problems here out of the 8 that were there in today's Codeforces round Div 3. And I mean, if there is somebody here who did problem G as well, you are more than welcome to discuss that. And apart from that, while I will be discussing all these problems, you guys are free to unmute and discuss your approaches and any doubts that you have along the way, right? So I think we can start, right? I'll just begin with problem A then. I mean, I would prefer if you guys don't write things in the chat and just speak out, because it is a little hard to look at the chat at the same time while you're explaining stuff. Okay, cool. So I think we can discuss some part on Sublime, and if there is a need to draw something, I would switch to OneNote in that case. Fine. So yeah, I think all of you can turn off your videos and anything that you're doing. So yeah, I mean, we are on problem A, and this problem is basically what this problem tells us here is that you've been given a string S, and the string consists of only letters A, B, and C, right? Now there are certain operations that you can do on this full string. You can, in one operation, let me just write it here. Increase the font as well. Remove A and B together. So what this means is that you select any random index where you have an A, and you select any random index where you have a B, and you remove these both characters, okay? And another operation here is that remove A and C together. Sorry, remove B and C together. Right. So I mean, what they wanted the question is for you to decide if you can have a situation where this whole string is reduced to a length of 0. What this means is that you've removed every single character. So essentially, in order to remove an A, let's say you have n A's, you would require n B's, right, for this, first of all. And similarly, if you have m C's, you would require m B's. And now if B is greater than n plus m, this just means that there are more B's than you actually require, right? So essentially what you need to do here is just need to check if the count of B equals to n plus m or not. If this is the case, then definitely you can remove every single character from this whole string. Otherwise you cannot. Like there can be 2 cases if B is less than n plus m. What this would mean is that either A or C, I mean some of A's or some of B's would be remaining when all the B's are finished. But you can only remove A's and C when you have B's, right? So for the case where B is less than n plus m, it is not possible. Similarly, for the case where B is greater than n plus m, this means that there will be certain B's remaining. And in order to remove a B, you require an A or a C, and you don't have any A's and C's, right? So yeah, I think this should be clear. If you guys have any doubts, I would be happy to answer. And let me just shift it here. Yeah, fine. So yeah, do you guys have any doubts or should we move to the second problem?
Move to the second problem.
Okay, fine. So yeah, let's move to the second problem here. And I mean, the great part about Div 3 contest is that you don't have to explain a lot. So yeah. Cool. Now in problem B, I mean, I am assuming that you all have already read the problem. So I will be just, explaining it in a very brief way. So essentially here in this question, you've been given an array A, n integers, and you need to sort it. Now, in order to sort it, there are certain types of operations that are possible. I mean, there is just one type of operation that is possible. What you can do is you can pick a substring or a subarray. You can pick the subarray. And after picking this subarray, what you can do is you can cyclically shift it. I mean, cyclically rotate it. For example, if you have an array something like 1, 2, 3, 4, you can cyclically rotate it by 1, and this array would look something like this: 2, 3, 4, 1. Similarly, if you want to, rotate it twice. And also the thing here is that in this question, you need to rotate only towards the left. You cannot rotate it towards the right, and I mean both ways. You can only rotate it towards the left. So now if I tell you that you need to rotate it towards the left twice, then this array would become something like this: 3, 4, 1, 2, right? So essentially in this whole question, all you need to do is you need to decide, do at max n such operations to sort the complete array. Now after, I think I've missed this part. After you've rotated this part, this subarray, you need to insert it back at its place. So, you insert it back after rotating. I think they should be clear. So yeah, I think if you guys have any approaches, I would love to know if somebody would like to discuss their approach here.
I had an approach that every time because the constraints were very small. So
Okay, just a minute. I think maybe your voice is coming up really very low. Is that the case with everybody, or is it just with me?
We can
Yeah, it
find
is very low.
element in the array and rotate as such that it gets shifted to the last position.
Okay, cool. That's a fine approach. What you can do here is you can start iterate from back. Iterate from back. Okay. So if this is your array, now if this is the element that you want, if you want to sort this whole array, this element should be the maximum, right? The maximum in this whole array. So you will check if this is the maximum in this whole array or not. If it is the maximum, then there is just no need to rotate or do anything, right? You can start, you can reduce your problem to a similar subproblem by just removing the last index. Now let's assume, let me just make two cases here. Case one is if the last element is the maximum in the current subproblem, then you don't need to do anything, you just continue. Case two is if not. Okay, in this case, what you need to do is you need to find the index where you have the maximum element. So let's say you find your maximum element to be somewhere here. So essentially, what do you need to do now? You need to rotate this whole thing such that the maximum comes to the end, right? So I think if you look at it, let's say there are 5 places here, 5 places towards the left of max, then you need to rotate it 6 times. Does that make sense here? Why are we rotating it 6 times? 6 times towards the left. Just a quick yes or no if this is clear.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I think this is very easy. What you can do is you can keep rotating your array until you get your whole array sorted. So the number of operations will be less than equal to n. Why? Because for every index, you're just doing one operation at max. In some cases, you're not doing operations. In some cases, you are. But if you are doing an operation at an index, it is just one operation. Right. So I think this should make sense now. And is there anything that I can explain further in this, or is it clear to all of you? Okay, so I am not looking at the chat here. Maybe if you are writing. Cool. So do you guys want me to kind of repeat this or tell you this whole problem in a more detailed manner, or is it clear? Okay, yes, it is clear. Right. So, as I told you, you can iterate from back. You can similarly do the same thing by iterating from front. Okay. From start. And this whole thing would be nothing but you would be dealing with minimums. Like you would be starting from the leftmost index. If you see that the element that is present at that index, it is the minimum, then you don't need to do anything. You just continue. And if it is not the minimum, you look for the minimum and just rotate it. Rotate it as many times such that, you get your minimum to this index. Now, the important part here is that how much are you rotating? What part of this whole array are you rotating? Rotating the complete prefix at index I, right? So if you're iterating from back, you need to rotate the complete prefix. Similarly, if you're iterating from the start, you need to rotate the complete suffix. So I did it by iterating from the start, and I'm not sure which one of them is easier to implement, but both of them are a little bit difficult to implement. Not difficult, I would say, but a little time consuming. So I'm assuming some of you would have had issues in implementing this part. But yeah, this is implementable, not that difficult, but just time consuming. Cool. So should we move to problem C now, or is there any doubts that are left?
Move to C.
Okay, cool. So now this problem, first of all, I'd like to know how many of you already did this problem. Like if it is a very difficult problem, then I can probably start with E1, because E1 was much easier. So I mean, which problem would you guys like me to start with, problem C or problem E1?
Even.
Okay. Yeah, so let's begin with problem E1. Now, this was again a very easy problem. There was nothing much to do here. All you had to do was implement a DQ. Okay, and I'm not sure if a DQ is totally necessary here. You might as well do it with a vector or something like that. But yeah, dealing with this whole problem using a DQ would have been much better. Right. So I'll just quickly explain this problem. So in this problem, you've been given a permutation. You have a permutation. And what you need to do is you also have a DQ. Now, a DQ is a data structure which supports the following 4 operations. You can insert in the DQ at the start, you can insert in the DQ at the end, you can pop from the DQ from the start, and you can pop from the DQ from the end. Right. Now, in this whole question, you don't have to do any popping, you just have to do insertion. Right. So let's say my current DQ is something like this, 1, 2, 4, 5, 4. Okay. Now you need to insert a 3. So the 2 types of operations allowed on a DQ are either you insert at the starting or you insert at the end, right? So if you insert at the starting, this would look something like this. 4 Control Shift T. And if you insert at the end, this would look something like this. Now, in this whole question, what you need to do is you need to, right, initially you have an empty DQ. You need to keep inserting elements into it in the given order of the permutation. For example, if the permutation is like 5, 4, 1, 2, 3, this means that all these elements have to be inserted in order, which means that first you insert 5, then you insert 4, then you insert 1, and all these elements can be inserted either at the back or at the start. Right. So in this question, you need to insert these elements in such a way that at the end, your overall content in the DQ is lexicographically the smallest. Right. So let's say for this example, if I insert 5 here, then if I insert 4 here, then I insert 1 here, 2 here, and a 3 here. So this is one of the ways of inserting elements into it, and it turns out that this is also the minimum, like the minimum in terms of lexicographical order. Right. So is the question clear to all of you, or do you guys want me to explain it further? Because then I think we can just jump into the solution.
Yeah, clear.
Cool. So now, is there any approach that you guys have, or do you guys want me to personally discuss that? Now, okay, let's just look at it like this. If I tell you that your DQ is something like this, 1, 3, 4, 5, and I tell you that you want to insert a 2. You want to insert a 2 in this DQ. So would you be inserting this 2 at the start or at the end? First of all, tell me this. If I want to maintain the minimum lexicographical order. At the end. Why would we insert at the end? Okay,
because
let's not talk about why. Yeah, exactly. Let's not talk about why. Let's just look at them. What would happen if we insert at the start, and what would happen if we insert at the end? Okay. Right. So can you see that since we know that in the lexicographical order, the first element that you encounter has to be the least one. I mean, it should be the minimum one, right? So if I just inserted 2 when I already have a 1, this would result in increasing. I mean, spoiling the lexicographical minimum order. Right? But if I insert at the end, my 1 is remaining at that same place. Now, similarly, if I tell you your DQ is something like this, 2, 3, 5, and I tell you to insert a 1. So where would you insert a 1? Would you insert it at the start or at the end? At the start. Like, let's just make 2 cases here, at the start and at the end. Here I would have 2, 3, 5, 1. Now, can you see that since 1 is lesser than 2, if I insert 1 before 2, my lexicographical order would improve. Right. So this is something that you can do for this whole DQ. You start with an empty DQ, and as soon as you start inserting elements, all you need to do is check this. Check if new element is less than the starting element. Now, if it is, let's just make it like push at start. Let's push at end. Right. So, I mean, is there anything? Is there any doubt that you guys have for this part? Like, why exactly are we doing this here?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so are you guys saying something, or like, was it a no or was it a hello? Okay, I'm assuming that it was a no. So you guys have understood this. Now, I mean, if you have to prove it officially, how would you do it? Like, it is very simple. A proof is what? I mean, there are two things that you're doing, right? I mean, if the element that is to be inserted, if that is less than the start, you're pushing it at the start, right? But let's say I do something else. Let's say I have something like 2, 3, 5, and instead of following this approach, I insert at the end. So can you see that this 1 will never come before 2? Like whatever you do after this 1 will never come before 2. But if we would have done something like this 1 would have come before 2, right? So this is like a proof by contradiction. I mean, you just do the other thing, and then you contradict the fact that at the end, this would not result in the best possible answer, right? So I think this should be a fine proof here. So yeah. So can we move to the next problem? If you guys have any doubts, I can answer them right now. Yeah, maybe you can write it in the chat as well. A yes or a no if this is clear.
Yeah, clear.
Cool. Okay. So now which problem would you guys want me to discuss? Let's discuss problem D. I think this was a problem where it is very intuitive what you need to do, but it is kind of hard to prove that what you're doing is correct. So let's discuss problem D now. Yeah, I'll explain this problem again. I'm assuming that you guys have read it. In this problem, you have an array again. Array of positive integers. N positive integers. Right. Now what you need to do is pick any two non-zero numbers and reduce them by 1. Okay. And when you do this, you add 1 to your answer. 1 to your answer. So essentially what you're saying is we want to find the maximum number of operations like these that you can do on this whole array. Okay. So yeah, I mean, that is it. Like if I give you a small example, if you have 2, 1, 3, then I can choose the 2 and 3 and remove 1 from each. Then I will have 1, 1, 2. And after that, similarly, I can do something like this. I can remove the 1 and a 2. So I would have something like 0, 1, 1. And then I will have 0, 0, 0. Right. Now, the important part here to note is that if you would have taken the other path, let's say you would have chosen these 1 and 1, you would have had something like this. And after this, you wouldn't have been able to, remove this 2. But if we followed this approach, like if we followed a different path, we were able to reduce everything to 0. What this means is that we have, achieved the maximum number of operations that we can do. Right. So is the question clear to all of you? We just need to find the maximum number of operations that we can do. Cool. So I guess Sumit was the one who wanted to discuss this. So maybe Sumit can discuss this. I can write it down here, whatever he speaks, if he is here.
I think there are something incorrect in my proof, so you can go on.
Okay.
There was some mistake
Uh,
in my proof.
Okay, not an issue. So I'll first of all tell you my approach. I know there are multiple approaches that would work for this problem, and I would be explaining my approach first of all here. My approach was to, if I have an array A, just sort it and store it in the form of a multi-set. So if I have multi-set, let's say A1, A2, so on up till AN minus 1 and AN. In fact, let's keep it like this. This is this. Okay. So what I did was in the sorted multi-set, I just picked up the last two maximum elements. And when I picked them up, what I did was I just removed one from each of them. Right. So I just did this. AN minus equals to 1. Now, when I did this, after removing one, I just inserted them back into the multi-set. So what happens here is that the order of these elements would change after you've subtracted one. For example, if I give you an example here, 2, 2, 3. So after I remove after I pick the last two elements and remove one from each of them, the array would become something like this. And if I keep it in a sorted multi-set, this would always be 1, 2, 2. Right. So in this approach, what is happening is that at any given point, you are not touching any elements that are smaller than the maximum and the second maximum. Okay. You are only picking the second maximum and the maximum and just removing one from them. And after that, you insert them back into the multi-set. So what happens is that your multi-set would get updated. Right. And as long as you can do this, this should be what you're looking for. So, I mean, if you guys have any doubts in this approach, I can explain the approach again, but maybe we can think about the proof together. I don't have a valid proof for this right now. It was just intuition.
What do you mean by putting back to the multi-set?
Okay, putting back into the multi-set means that after I subtracted one from each of these elements, I insert these elements back into the multi-set. For example, my multi-set is something like 2, 2, 3, right? First of all. Now, if I pick up 2 and 3 and I make them 1, 2, then when I insert them back into the multi-set, my multi-set would become something like this. All these elements would remain sorted. Right. So is there any doubt that you guys have in this part? Or maybe I can show you my code just a little for understanding how I am doing this insertion and deletion into the multi-set. Yeah, so this is what I'm doing. I am just storing pairs here. In fact, when I'm storing pairs, I don't need a multi-set. Instead, I can just keep a set. Because in this pair, what I'm storing is I'm storing the value and I'm storing the corresponding index. So this pair overall would always be unique. Right. Now, what I've done here is that I've stored minus a instead of a. A is the value at that particular index. By doing this, what I'm achieving is that when I'm removing elements from the multi-set, I am removing the first two elements from the multi-set. I won't have to remove the last two elements. So, I mean, the advantage that I'm gaining here is that I'm writing lesser code, because in order to pick the last two elements from the multi-set, you need to write some more code than this, what I've written. Okay, so I've removed the first two pairs from the multi-set and I have added a value. Why? Because I was doing minus a. But in our case, what we were discussing was just subtracting one. Okay. And similarly, like if I'm just checking if the value is less than 0, then I still need to insert it. If it is not less than 0, then I don't insert it. Right. So my multi-set would always contain values that are non-negative. Oh, sorry, non-zero. I mean, all the values are already non-negative. Can we do this using a priority queue? Yes, definitely you can. So is the approach clear to all of you right now? We will have to think about the proof a little. I don't have a valid proof for it right now. But if the approach itself is not clear, I would be happy to first explain that.
Cleared.
Okay, cool. So now, I mean, I think we can think about the proof a little for another 5 minutes. But if we are not able to think about it, then yeah, obviously we can move to the next problem.
ये multi-set वाला एक और बता देना.
Achha, okay. In this multi-set, what I'm doing is I'm just storing all these elements in a sorted manner. Okay. A multi-set allows you to store elements in a sorted manner. That is exactly what a multi-set is used for everywhere. Right. So I'm storing all these elements in a sorted order and I'm extracting the last two elements from the multi-set. What are these last two elements? The maximum and the second maximum. Okay. And I subtract one value from each of them. Okay. So by subtracting one from each of them, I'm just, adding one to my answer. Basically, I'm just pairing up ones. And then when I've reduced one from each of them, I just insert them back into the multiset. Okay. So is this clear? I mean, the approach. But in case, okay, so there is a doubt, but in case 10 to the power 5, okay, let me just put this doubt here. This is the doubt here. But in case 10 to the power 5 into 10 to the power 5, we will remove one by one. Okay, so that is a valid doubt. I also looked at it once before implementing this part. Now, there is one thing that you need to observe in this question, okay? Which is what? Which is this, that you need to find every pair. You just don't have to find the number, you have to find every pair. So even if these values could go up to a very large number, you wouldn't be printing a lot of numbers. Okay, I mean, that is just first observation. I would be telling you the other part as well, but you have to print all these values. So obviously they won't be expecting you to print, let's say, around 10 to the power 5 values for every single array, right? Yeah, and apart from that, this is a very strong observation, or a very common observation that you should make while you're giving contest. The thing is that for all the questions that require you to print the output, I mean, print all the possible ways, let's say, or print all the possible combinations, the first thing that should come to your mind is the number of possible ways or the number of possible combinations would be very less. Why? Because if these combinations or ways are very large, you cannot print them. Just printing all these values would give you a TLE. Right. So I think this is something that you should keep in mind every time when you're attempting a contest, and you have to print the actual answer. Instead of just the number, you have to print the actual answer. So the first observation that you should make is that the number of outputs would be very less. Right. That was the first part. Apart from that, it is something is written here. It is guaranteed that the sum of n over all test cases doesn't exceed 10 to the power 5. Right. So this whole overall part of test cases is just nullified. We don't really care about that now. And it is also guaranteed that the sum of all AI will not exceed 10 to the power 5, right? So instead of doing 10 to the power 5 into 10 to the power 5, the overall number of outputs that you will be making in all the test cases would be 10 to the power 5. Right. So is this part clear? Like, for the person who asked this doubt? Cool. So yeah, I think again, I'm not sure about the proof. I have done a lot of similar problems like these, and all of them seem to work the way I have done this, using a priority queue or using a multiset. But again, I don't have a valid proof of it right now. Okay.
Yeah, we can do one thing, that we can take three values A, B, C.
Okay, let's
And
do it like this.
Let's say A is less than B and less than C.
Cool.
Then we know that there exist only three ways to pick two elements. Either we pick A comma B, or B comma C, or A comma C. And
okay,
I
either we
claim
can
that
pick A comma B. Yeah, just a minute. Either we can pick A comma B, or B comma C, or C comma A. Yeah. Yeah. What do you claim?
I claim that the answer in last two cases will be same. I mean, the total operation we do in the last two cases will be same, and in the first case it will be, I think, less. And we can do this by case work.
That's a very strong claim. Yeah. Tell me.
So we can do case by case. So let's first do case 1, A comma B.
Okay,
So
let me just write the
pick
claim
A-
first of all. Let me write the claim here. The claim is first two ways
Last two
give
ways.
the same answer. Oh, sorry, give the same answer. Last two ways. Okay.
Yes, last two ways.
Give the same answer while the first way might give lesser answer.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about the cases here. A comma B.
Yeah. So first we pick A comma B, then it will become 0 comma B minus A. If we pick, and we get answer added to 1. We will get additional plus A. Right. We'll get plus A from here. Then we'll get minimum of B minus A comma C from the second part.
Right. Exactly. We'll have minimum of B minus A comma C. Okay.
And then we
No,
can
obviously
something to like
B minus A would be smaller, right? Because it is already. Yeah. So add.
Then we can something to like, it will be minimum of B comma C plus A. We'll add A to both sides.
Oh, just a
No,
minute, just a minute. What are you saying?
Uh,
I'm not getting that part.
Yeah, I
Can you
think you
repeat
can
the
say that b minus a will be smaller. I think that's
Yeah,
correct.
definitely.
Yeah, I think so. Here we get only answer as B.
Okay.
I will get
Oh,
total
acha,
answer, we
okay,
get
okay,
B.
cool. Right. The answer here is B.
And in the other case,
Right.
I think we'll get answer. Yeah. In the second case, we'll first pick B comma C, then it will become 0 comma C minus B. Then it will get plus B here. And then next case, we'll get minimum of A comma, I think B comma C minus B. Right. Is it correct?
So
A
again,
comma
this
C
could
minus
be anything. This could be anything like C minus. If this is C minus B, then you have overall answer
C.
C. And
And
if
it's
this is
A,
A, then you have overall answer. Oh, right. This is fine, but again, like what you've done is a little different. Okay. What you've done is you've chosen the complete elements, and what I have done is I'm not choosing the complete elements. I'm just subtracting one from each of them.
No, I think we can. Yeah, you're right. I think.
I am
Yeah,
not
so
sure about this. Yeah, go on.
I do not have like this a technical proof, but intuitively, like
There could be two cases. One case is that all elements are used, like every
Okay, just a minute. I think your voice went off again.
Yeah. His voice went off.
Okay, you're audible very slightly. Maybe you can do something about your audio. Okay, so yeah, do we want to wait for that or like? Okay, is it just with me that I'm not able to hear him, or like is it with everybody? Oh, okay, just a minute. I think. Yeah, can somebody just confirm if the issue was with his audio or like is it with my
His audio.
speaker? Okay, cool.
No, with everybody.
So now I'm not sure about how exactly should I prove problem D, but I just had a very strong intuition for this, and it seems to be correct. Like if you look at it, if you consider some cases, it should be fine. But again, I don't have a valid proof for this. And I mean, I have done a lot of problems which are similar to this, and I've always followed this approach. When I want to maximize this part, I've always followed this approach. I remember solving a lot of problems like these. But yeah, again, I haven't proved them anytime, and it seemed to work every time. So yeah, I guess we can move on to the next one. Can you try run one test case with your approach? Yeah, sure. Sure. So if I talk about, let's pick up a case here. How about 8200, 82011? 82011. So in the multi-set, these values would look something like this. Obviously, I'm not inserting these zeros, so let's just skip the zeros. This would look something like this, okay? Now I remove the last two elements and I subtract one from them. So I will have something like this 1, 1, and I've removed these two elements, which are 2, 8. After removing them, I convert them to 1, 7, and I insert this back into the multi-set. Right? After that, again, I do this part. I have 1, 1, which is remaining, and I have 1, 7, which I've removed. So which this will be converted to 0, 6, wherein I won't be inserting the 0. I would only be inserting the 6. Right. So do I need to explain it further? I think this should be clear now. Only one is remaining here. One, 5, and then it turns to be 4. Okay, yes, clear. You just said that we need to minimize output, but in your approach, you aren't. Why is this working? Minimize output, I'm not sure what exactly you're talking about. I did not say that we have to minimize the output. We have to maximize the output. What I was referring to was that for any question that requires you to print these outputs instead of just the number of outputs, an observation to make there should be that the number of outputs would be less. That is what I was saying. because you need to print all these numbers, right? You cannot be printing 10 to the power 8 or 10 to the power 9 numbers, right? So either there would be some hints in the constraints, or yeah, if there are no hints in the constraint, you should understand that there won't be a lot of outputs. Now, this is again a very strong observation in problems like, let's say I tell you, let's say I give you a problem for every L to R in an array. Find numbers satisfying a given property. Now, if I tell you that I give you 10 to the power 5 queries, and I mean, obviously, if all the 10 to the power 5 numbers are following that property, what this would mean is that you would be printing 10 to the power 10 numbers. But since this cannot happen, you cannot print such a large amount of numbers. Something that should come to your mind is your overall number for each query in average will be less than equal to 10, because obviously you would be printing more than 10 to the power 6 numbers, right? So these are certain observations that are very important for harder problems, because they don't explicitly tell you that the output would be less or the number of outputs would be less. Okay. So,
Hello.
Yeah.
Now I'm audible.
Yeah, you're audible now.
Yeah. So, like, if we check this total sum of the array, and if we see like if the sum is even, and the half of the sum is greater than or equal to the largest element in the array, then all the elements would be used. Like every element will be left with 0, 0. Like all the elements would be used. And if it is odd and half the sum is still greater than the array, then all the elements, just 1 and 0 would be left in the end, because like odd collect whatever the sum is remaining. And in the case where the sum, like half the sum is smaller than the largest element, in that case, the sum of the array minus the largest element would be the number of times we can subtract.
Okay, just a minute. If this is less than,
Yeah, if it's less than the largest, then
then the answer is equal to sum minus max.
Yeah.
Okay, but that is like just a normal number, right? How would you pick these elements? That is the problem in this question. You also need to print the output, right?
Yeah. I'm saying that by this we can observe that like our aim is like all the elements, by choosing it in any order, like only the case where it's like half of the sum is greater than is smaller than the largest element. In that case, picking the largest element first picking any order would cause some issue. In any other case, like the first two cases, it will not cause an issue, because if the sum is odd, then in odd or even, in any case we pick, will eventually be left with 1, 0 or 0, 0 in the remaining values. And only in the case in which the largest element is greater than half of the sum, in that we have to subtract every element from the largest element of the array.
But just a minute, if you talk about this case, where your sum by 2 is less than largest, right?
Yeah.
So how would you be picking up elements here? Can you tell me
So
again?
any element which is smaller than the largest element would always be in a way like greater than.
Okay. And what about this one? How would you pick elements here?
In first two cases, in any order we pick the elements, the remaining would in the last we would be left with a sequence in which there are just two values. Either it's, if it is odd, the sum is odd, then we would be left with 1, 0, or we would be left with 0, 0 if the sum is even, because we are subtracting 1, like -2 every time from the total sum. Like 1 value we are
but you can't be doing that arbitrarily, right? I mean, you can't be picking up any arbitrary 2 elements and just subtract 1 from them. I don't think
it
that
should
would work.
Except the case in the largest array element, I guess.
Okay, let's talk about this case. You are saying the sum of half is greater than that, right? So let's say I tell you something like okay, so you are saying the half is greater, right? So yeah, I think that would work if you pick up any arbitrary elements.
Yeah.
Okay, let's consider a case here where you have 8 comma 8 comma 8 comma 8 comma 8 comma 9. So in this case, the half of sum is greater than 9, right? So if I pick up any arbitrary elements, this I can just pick up these elements like this, and then I have 8 comma 9 here. Now this would become 0 comma 1. Oh, right. Okay, so
The last two cases are the case in which eventually the array would be left with, eventually will be left with just one element. And the first case is in which all the elements would cancel out each other and eventually all the values would consume. And in the second,
right.
and in case which it is odd and the half of the sum is greater than, then we will be left with a value 1 in the R container. And in the second case, we'll be left with whatever the value is of some minus max.
So minus max, right? Yeah, I think this is correct, but again, like understanding why picking up any arbitrary two numbers works here is again a task, right? So how would you prove something like that? Like picking up any arbitrary two elements would work at the end. There is not a formal proof for that, right? Even the approach that I've told you doesn't have a formal proof right now. Okay, anyway, let's move to problem C. I think the intuition should be clear to all of you why things like these are working. Okay, now, okay, so can somebody tell me like if you guys were able to do this problem or you weren't able to do this problem during the contest? Like maybe you can write it in the chat if you were able to do it. Not able to do, okay. Implementation took the whole time. Okay, implementation was not that heavy, I would say. I think implementing B was even harder than implementing problem C, in my opinion. So yeah, let's discuss the approach here. Let me open OneNote here now for this. Right. So in this question, they've given us a grid n cross m. Right. And now the thing here is that if I look at any particular cell in this whole grid, you need to make a tick mark. And a tick mark is defined in such a way that you start, extending upwards towards the diagonal, like in the form of a diagonal, right? For example, this could be a tick mark. Now, a tick mark is only valid if all the points that are on this tick mark are black. Okay, so this whole grid has certain black points and white points. If you make a tick mark through the black points, this is a valid tick mark, otherwise it is not. Okay, so and what they've given you here is that they have already given you a grid in which some of the cells are black. Okay, so let's say these cells are black. Okay, now what they want here in this question is for you to decide if you can form certain tick marks which cover all these black points. Okay, make a tick mark like this and another tick mark like this. Can you see that all these black points are getting covered? Okay, so
Yes.
Cool. So I mean, this question is not put up in this way. This question is put up in a different way. What they've told you here is that there is a person, let's name him X. So what X does is that on an empty grid, X starts making tick marks. Okay, and when X makes a tick mark, all the cells that are on this tick mark become blank. Okay, like this. This is what they've given in the question. And after this person X is done with making all these ticks, you have been given the final string, final grid. Now you need to determine whether this is a valid grid or not. Now, how would this be a valid grid? This would be a valid grid if you can form certain tick marks which cover all the black points and are not covering any white points. Okay, let me write it here. Mark certain marks such that all the black cells are covered by at least one tick mark, and no white cell is covered. Okay, so is the question clear to you? Like, you just have to print a yes or a no. If this is possible, then you print a yes. If this is not possible, then you print a no.
Cleared.
Okay, cool. So I mean, it is very simple. Okay, all you have to do is implement it in a good way. Like, if you start implementing this whole problem in this way, you can also implement it like this, but this would be very difficult to implement. For example, if you start a tick mark here and you say that this has to be of length 5, then you go here 5, and then you go here 5. In fact, you go 6 here because these are 5. So this is the 6th point, and then you say 5 points again. So if you start implementing like this, that I want to make a tick mark of 5 points, in fact 5 length, then I will go like this. This would become a little difficult because every time you would have to keep track when exactly do you need to switch, right? But instead, if you implement this problem like this, also I think I missed a small detail in this problem. They've told you that all these tick marks that you're forming, their length has to be at least, length of each tick mark has to be greater than or equal to k. Now, what is the meaning of the length? The length means just the left or the right arm's length. So they don't include this base point. For example, this should be L, this should be L. They don't include this base point in this whole length, right? So in other words, what you can say is that this whole tick mark should be comprising of at least 2k plus 1 points, right? Can I say this? This tick mark should be comprising of at least 2k plus 1 points, such that wherever you are ending, like if your tick mark is something like this, the left arm and the right arm should be equal. You cannot have something like you increase the left arm so much and you increase the right arm only till so much. You cannot do that. All these lengths have to be same, right? Now, I mean, this is very simple to implement. All you need to do is, for every point, let's say this is a black point, okay? You start iterating upwards. You start iterating like this, and you keep going upwards, right? Now, as soon as you see that, you know, your overall length, let's say this length is greater than k. If it is greater than k, what this means is that essentially this is a valid tick mark. But let's say I tell you that you go upwards and you don't find a tick mark of length at least k. Let's say I give you k equals to 5 and you find only these. So would this be considered a valid tick mark? Can somebody tell me? The length here is just 2. So would this be considered a valid tick mark if k equals to 5? Okay, I don't see any answer. Maybe you guys can write in the chat if you're not comfortable speaking.
No.
So this wouldn't be considered a valid tick mark, right? But now let's say I tell you this is your tick mark, this, and this is of length 7 and k equals to 5. This would be considered a valid tick mark, right? And why would you leave these points? If I tell you have to have your length greater than or equal to 5, why would you stop at 5? Why would you not want to increase it further? I mean, you can obviously do that, right? You just have to cover every black cell at least once with with any just tick mark, right? So if 5 ends here and I'm still able to find more points, I would be happy to, you know, just extend it further, right? So for every given cell in the grid, you can just start iterating upwards and see if while you're iterating, you're only coming on black points or not. If you're coming on white points, that is the time you break. And now as soon as you break, you just see the number of points that you covered, were they greater than or equal to 2k plus 1? If they, were they greater than or equal to 2k plus 1 or not? If they were, then that just means that this is a valid tick mark. So what you can do is you can maintain two grids. This is your given grid and this is your final grid. This is your given, this is your final. Now in the given grid, at every black point, you just start iterating upwards. And after you are done iterating, you just find the number of points. If they're greater than 2k plus 1, you mark these cells black here. these cells blank in the final grid. And after you're done with every possible cell, you just compare these two. These two grids should be same at the end. Right, so is this clear, or do you guys want me to explain it further? I can show you the code for
Clear.
this. Cool. Okay, so yeah, I think this is the part where I'm implementing it. This is the given grid. This is the obtained grid. So what I'm doing is, if this cell, now if it is a star, then this means that this is a black cell. If it is not a star, this means it is a white cell. So initially I've covered my whole final grid with dots. Dots just means white cells. Now this is a vector which what this vector is storing is the number of points that I'm marking with this tick mark. Okay. So now here I'm comparing it with 2k plus 2 and not 2k plus 1. Why? Because this part, this intersection part, I'm inserting it twice. It is just to implement it in a better way. That is why I'm putting this part twice, because every other point is getting paired up, right? So why shouldn't I pair this part up as well with itself? So okay, so I'm just doing this. I'm just calling this function called iterate, which just returns me the pair of points. The vector of points which are represented by a pair, which are getting marked by this tick mark, starting from this black cell. Cool. So what I'm doing is I'm just checking. Now down is my part where in the which row I am in. Left is the part where my left arm is going. Right is the part where my right arm is going. So initially all of them are at the same point. The row part, the row is at I, the left arm is at J, the right arm is at J as well. Now I need to just check. I'm just iterating upwards, right? So down has to be greater than equal to 0. Left has to be greater than equal to 0. Now right has to be less than the length of the column. The length of the column is given by this. Again, what else is important? The right arm, the left arm at which point it is, it should be a black point. Similarly, the right arm at the point it is, it should be a black point. If this is the case, I just insert these both points in my marked vector, which tells me the points that are getting marked. And I do left minus minus and right plus plus. Left minus minus, why? Because the left arm is, the column in the left arm is decreasing. Similarly, the column in the right arm is increasing. And the row has to go up. So down minus minus. Right, and at the end, I'm just doing if given equals to obtained, then I do yes, otherwise no. So yeah, I think this should be clear to all of you. If it is not, I would be happy to answer any doubts that you have. And you guys are free to write in the chat as well if you want to. Just let me put this here. Clear. Okay, cool. So now which problem would you guys want me to discuss? E2 or F? Only these two problems are left.
F.
F, okay. E2. So two people are saying E2. Maybe we can discuss E2 then. Yeah, this is E2. E2 was very simple. Let me just quickly explain. This was very simple. So this is like just a small extension in problem even. In the problem even, we wanted the whole array, the final permutation in the DQ. Like in problem even, I think I've already explained it. You need to find a strategy to insert elements into the DQ such that the final elements in the DQ are in the smallest lexicographical order as possible. Okay, as small as possible. Right, and in E2, all you need to do is you need to minimize the number of inversions. Now, what are these inversions? First of all, let's discuss what is an inversion very quickly. So if this is an array, and let's say this is an index I, this is an index j. Now, if I is less than j, which clearly here it is, if I is less than j and ai is greater than aj, then this is an inversion. Okay. So now you need to insert elements into the DQ in such a way that your total number of inversions are minimum. Right. Now, again, this is very simple to, it has a very simple idea. It is very similar to even. So let's say I give you a DQ, which is something like this, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now you want to insert a 1. So where would you insert? Let's try out two possibilities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. So first of all, there is just one observation that you need to see, that for this given Q, if I already know that the answer is answer till here equals to X. So this subarray won't change, okay? This subarray will never change now. So the number of inversions in this subarray will remain same now. Either you insert one here or you insert one there, right? So this subarray is not getting affected in any way whatsoever. But what is getting affected? The inversions associated with one, right? Is this making sense? The inversions with one are only getting affected. For example, in this first question, what would be my answer? My answer would be inversions of this plus inversions associated with one. Similarly here again, right?
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, I think this is
sadly हो गया.
Priyansh got disconnected, right? Okay. I was afraid I did.
Yeah, so can somebody just confirm where exactly did I lose my connection? Like what part was clear?
Define an inversion.
Oh my God, did we lose at that point? I explained a lot after that.
No inversion when we are adding one.
Yeah.
Inversion
When we are writing
associated with this
One.
second line.
Till line 7.
Okay, so till line 7 it is clear, right? So cool. So now can you see that the inversions associated with this subarray 2, 3, 4, 5, they will never change. Will they ever change now? All these elements are fixed. So even if I cannot insert elements in between. I'm only inserting elements outside this subarray. So the number of inversions associated with this subarray particularly won't change. What would change is the number of inversions associated with one. So now let's say I insert it at the start and I see that the extra inversions are X. Okay. And similarly, if I insert it at the end and the extra inversions are Y. And if X is less than Y, where would I insert it? Can somebody tell me this? Where would I insert my one? At the start, right? And similarly, if Y is greater than X, Y is less than X, then I would insert it at the end. So how do you find the number of inversions associated with one? That is the question now. Okay, so let's make two cases. Case one, insert at the start. Now, what would be the number of inversions? Inversions would be what? Inversions would be number of elements less than one in the previous subarray. Right? Is this clear? Like when you insert it at the start, all the elements that are less than one, they would be at the right? So if they're at the right side, they would be forming an inversion. Similarly, for case 2, insert at the end greater than 1 in the previous subarray. Right? So, I mean, you just have to find out the number of elements that are less than 1, and you just have to find out the number of elements that are greater than 1. The number of elements that you've already inserted in that. right? And if, I mean, in the case one, the number is less, you insert it at the start. If the value is greater, in the case one compared to case two, you insert it at the end. Now, the question is, how do you find this number? Number of elements greater than one, number of elements smaller than one. How do you find this? So maybe somebody can tell me this. How do you find this?
Ordered set.
Using PBDS.
PVDS.
Exactly. So you can use an ordered set, or I mean, I don't know if you can use a multi-set as well here, but using an ordered set would be the best choice here, because an ordered set, what does it tell you? It tells you. Yeah, go on.
Can we not sort all the? Can we not keep all the values sorted?
We are keeping it sorted, but if you use
Then
a
we
set,
can use lower bound.
no, but you cannot use a lower bound. The lower bound only tells you an iterator. It does not tell you the number. In case of a vector, it does tell you a number, but in case of a set, it does not tell you the exact number of elements smaller. That is why, I mean, there is just one thing. There is no concept of an index in a set or a map. Okay, why? Because these are red black trees. You cannot have an index in a tree, right? I mean, if it is a tree, a rooted tree, what would an index define here? But in case of a vector, it is like a single list. So in this case, an index is like a valid thing. So in case of a set or a map, there is nothing like an index. So instead of using a set or a map, you can use an ordered set. An ordered set also keeps track of the index. Right? Is this making sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Use an ordered set. Now, I mean, it is very simple. You just have to find out the number of elements smaller than your given element. You just look at the position. If you insert it in the ordered set, where exactly would it be? And you just subtract one from it. That would be the number of elements smaller. Now, if you want to find the number of elements greater, you first of all find the number of elements that are less than or equal to this element. And you just subtract it from the size of this whole PBDS or an ordered set. Right? So let me just put it here. Index of this element. Number of elements. Size of PBDS minus number of elements less than equal to element. Right. So I think this should be clear to you now. And I mean, obviously, these elements are not. What are these? These are not unique. Okay. So in order to insert elements, I mean, this is another concept that I think I should tell you guys. Let's say I tell you that you have to insert these elements 3, 3, 4, 1 inside a set. So if you insert these elements naively inside a set, the set would look something like this. But instead of storing this like this, if you pair these numbers up with their indices, something like this. 4, 2, 1, 3. And now if you insert these elements into a set in the form of a pair, all these elements will remain unique. Right. So this is another concept that you should keep in mind whenever you have to insert elements inside a set. What you can do is you can pair these elements with their indices. By pairing them up, all these elements will remain unique. So you won't have to use a multi-set for that. Right. So is this whole question clear to you? Should I just show you my code for this?
Cleared.
Cool. So let's look at the code for this. It is very simple. I am just finding the number of elements that are smaller than this element. I just find out this index of a minus 1 infinity. Why infinity? Because there would be a lot of elements which would be something like 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3. But there would never be an element whose index is infinity. So if you compare these two pairs where you have 2, 3 and 2, infinity, 2, infinity will always come after 2, 3. Right? So that is why this index tells me the number of elements smaller. This index tells me the number of elements smaller or equal to, right? So, and these are the number of elements which are same, like which are equal to this element. So smaller equals to this and bigger equals to size of PBDS minus smaller minus. Right? So is this clear? I mean, you
Yes,
don't
clear.
have to do this. This is not required. Smaller minus same is not required. You can just do this. Index 2, you can subtract index 2 here because these are both the same quantities. Now what I'm doing is if smaller is less than bigger. Okay, what did I do here? What is this?
Double comparisons are not supported in C++.
I don't know. This is like a typo here, and I'm not sure how this is working. Maybe what it is doing is this is just comparing this part. Oh my god, this can be hacked. Like if you guys want to try, you can hack it. this definitely can be hacked. If anybody tries, you can try to hack it. This can be hacked. The thing here is that I am not sure how did I put this greater than a here, because I think I put it here because this was something I was using in problem even as well. So this greater than a I forgot to remove here. So I think if you compare this part, smaller is less than bigger, and what this would give you is a number 0 or a 1, right? This is a true or a false. So if this is a 0 or a 1, and let's say it gives you a 1, so 1 has to be greater than a for this whole condition to be satisfied. I think you can hack it if you want to. This can be hacked, and I'm not sure how exactly is this working for so many cases here. Just a minute. Okay. Yeah, let's look at the cases for which this is working. Okay, I am not sure how exactly this is working for such a lot of test cases. This could have failed for any one of them. This is a huge mistake. Okay, let's not talk about it. You can hack it if you want to. But yeah, I hope this whole question is clear to all of you. Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. So let's talk about problem F now. This was a little difficult. It was not so trivial. But yeah, let's discuss this. So in this whole problem, what is happening is you've been given an array A of binary numbers like 0 and 1. Now what you need to do is you need to shift this whole array cyclically by d units. So you shift it here in the right side. Okay. So let me just write it here. If your array is something like this, and you shift it twice towards the right, your array would look something like 4, 3, 3, 4, 1, 2. Okay. So you need to shift it right by d units. D is the given number. You need to take the AND of this whole array. For example, you take this A and 3, 2 and 4, 3 and 1, 4 and 2. Okay. So this is what you need to do. And after doing this operation, you need to continue doing this operation, continue it eventually, like you continue it infinitely until and unless all the elements in this whole array become 0. Now, since this is a binary array, there would be a point where all of these elements would become a 0, and apart from certain conditions that I would be discussing. So you want all the elements to become 0. Now you need to find out the minimum number of steps that need to happen for this to occur. Okay, just a minute. Yeah. So you need to find the minimum number of steps that need to happen on this array, such that after these steps, all the elements in this array become 0. And if this is not the case, what happens is that you need to print that even if you continue infinitely, all the elements won't become 0. So in that case, you need to print -1. Okay, so is the question clear to all of you? Then I can explain the approach here.
Yes, clear.
Okay, cool. Now let's form a very simple observation. Let's say I tell you this is an array. This is a number. If I shift it cyclically by d units, where exactly would it be? It would be here, right? D. Similarly, I shift it again d. So this is 2d. Right? It would go on until now. When would there be a situation when after even jumping, you come back to your own place? For example, I give you an array like this. 1, 2, 3, 3, 4. Now I want that this whole array should become same after certain operations. After performing, let's say d equals to 2. This would become something like this, right? 3, 4, 1, 2. Again, if you do this again, you would have something like 1, 2, 3, 4. So can you see that this whole array has become the same after doing 2 operations? The array which was initially given, it has become the same. अच्छा, okay, somebody is saying E2 में आपके उस if statement का कोई use ही नहीं है, इसलिए it passed all the test cases. Why use क्यों नहीं है? देखते हैं एक बार. Use तो है उसका.
भैया हम लोगों को तो सिर्फ आंसर चाहिए था ना, तो DQ में इंसर्ट करे या नहीं करे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता.
Oh, got it. बच गया मैं. सही कहा. हाँ, DQ मैटर नहीं करती यहाँ पर, तो इसका कोई मतलब नहीं है, बेकार ही है. सही कहा, बच गया मैं. ओके, तो हाँ, हम क्या डिस्कस कर रहे थे? हम प्रॉब्लम F डिस्कस कर रहे थे. कोई so what exactly was I explaining? Yeah, there would be certain number of operations after which your overall array would become same. Now my claim is the number of operations after which the array becomes same is what? Is n divided by GCD of n, d. Now this is a little hard to understand why this works, but I mean, can you try to understand why this is working? After these many operations, the whole array will become same. What this means is that every element would have come back to its same place. So if this is not making sense, I can explain it further, but try to understand this first. I'll give you a minute or so to understand this. Okay, so is this clear, like, or should I explain it? Okay, let's look at some examples. Let's say I tell you have. Let me give you a valid proof for this. Let's say I'm at index k. Okay, so I am doing how many operations? Let's say I do x operations. So I want x comma d modulo n. This is what I want, right? This should be equal to k. For every element to come back to its same place, this should be the condition, right? Like, is this making sense? Now, if this has to be the case, how can I split it? I want x comma d, x into d modulo n to be 0. Only then this would be possible, right? So let me just write it here. X into d modulo n should be equal to 0. What this means is x comma d should be a multiple of, let's write it like k times n. Okay, this is what we want. Or let's not name it k, let's name it something like y times n. We want to find this x. So what is x? X is like y into n by d, right? So we want to find the smallest multiple of n for which this works. So what would be this y? It is a little hard to explain, but this overall quantity, if you want to minimize it, it has to be n divided by GCD of n. I haven't explained it clearly, but yeah, this is a little difficult to explain. Let me try to think of a way to explain this. Okay, so we want, consider it like this, okay? Consider it like this. We want x comma d, x into d to be a multiple of n, right? So what you want is you want to multiply this x by, let's say x equals to 1 right now, first of all. So what would you want to multiply x with in order for this overall quantity to be a multiple of n? You would multiply this number, right? You would multiply n divided by GCD of n comma d. Why? Because what will happen here is that Okay, give me a minute here. If you have something like this, you are removing the parts, you are removing all these multiples which are common in D and N here by doing this, and you are including the other elements. Like for example, if you consider it in terms of a prime factorization, something like P1 times K1, P2 times K2, and so on until Pn times Kn, and N is your given element like this, and D equals to P1 times K1 minus 5, let's say. So essentially you would want to have P1 into 5, right? You would have to multiply this number for that particular quantity to be a multiple of N. So if you take the GCD, these quantities will get cancelled out and P1 to the power 5 will be remaining. Similarly for all the primes. So that is why dividing N by the GCD of N comma D will give you the number of steps that you need to come back to the same position that you were at initially. Right, so is this part clear?
Yes, now it's clear.
Okay, cool. Now I'm also assuming that people who are attending this whole session till now are not from level 1 or level 2, because for people like people from level 2, it would be really hard to understand how this is all working out. For level 3, I think you guys can understand it. But yeah, I mean, I'm not stopping anybody here to listen to what I'm saying. But again, if you guys are not able to understand really well for level 2 and level 1, I cannot guarantee that you would be able to understand it. Right. Now, can you see that after certain steps, which are N divided by GCD of N comma D, you would come back to your same place. So let's say I tell you that this element is a 0. Okay. So this would go to index I plus D. It would make this element a 0. It would go again, it would make this element a 0. Why will it make all these elements 0? Because this is already a 0. So if you take AND of this element with any other element, this would become a 0. Once this becomes a 0, changing the other element, it would become a 0. Right? So if you look at this whole question, there are certain groups that are getting formed. For example, if you talk about the first index, let me just take it like this. What example should I take? Let us have something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and D equals to 2. So if you talk about 1 will get paired up with 3. 3 will get paired up with 5. Similarly, 2 will get paired up with 4, and this will get paired up with 6. Now, can you see that once you are at 5, you will again be going to 1. Once you are at 6, you will again be going to 2. Both these groups are a little different. I mean, they are totally different from each other. Right? All you can say is that they're disjoint. There wouldn't be similar elements, I mean same elements in both the groups. So you can group these elements according to what all elements are there in that group. For example, 1, if you start with 1, you go to 3, you go to 5. Then when you come back to 1, you already see that this is already in a group. So that means that this group is complete. That means that you've already taken a complete round. Okay. Now, if I tell you that D equals to 1, D equals to, in fact, 5, let's say. So you would be having 1, 6, then you would have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, then you would have 2, then you would have, I'm not sure if I'm writing it correctly, 5, then you would have 3. Right? Okay. If D equals to 5, you go to 1, then you go to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, fine. Then you go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This should have been 5. Then you go to 4, then you go to 3, then you go to 2. So can you see in this example, all of these elements are getting paired up. I mean, all of these elements are coming into a single group. So it is very important to group these elements. Okay. After you are done with grouping these elements, let us discuss about how to find the answer for a single group. So let's say in this whole group, all these elements are 1. So can I convert this whole array into zeros by doing anything? If all the elements in this group are 1. Can I convert this whole group to zeros if these are the elements that are present in this group? All of them are 1. You jump to any index, you take the AND, it will become a 1. It won't change to 0.
No.
Exactly. Now let's say I give you an example like this: 0, 1, 1. Now can I convert it to all zeros? Because first of all, 0 will be going to 1, then this will be going to another 1. So can I convert it to zeros now? I can, right? I can convert all these elements to zeros. Cool. So, I mean, an important thing here is to just see that all these elements in the group are not zero. I mean, or not ones. Even if there is a single zero, all these elements can be converted to zeros. Now, the important part here is that the number of steps that are required. For example, if I give you an array like this, 1, 0. So can you tell me the number of steps that are required to convert all these elements to zeros? All these elements will be hopping, okay? All these elements will be jumping one by one towards the side. This is something to take care of. So tell me the number of steps required to convert this whole array to zeros. This zero will be going here, but this zero would have already gone here in that case. Right? So, I mean, is this making sense or is this all going above your head? It is a little hard to understand here. I mean, totally agreeing to this.
Yeah, I'm getting it. So it will be two, right? 2 steps.
2 steps, exactly. Why? Because this zero will convert this one to a zero. And after that, this one will get converted to a zero, right? And this will get converted to all zeros. Now let us take another example. This is an important example. Let's say I tell you something like this: 0, 1, 0, What about this one? How many steps are required? After one step, what would happen? After one step, all the adjacent elements would be paired up, right? So we will have something like this: 0, 0 and 1. Because okay, so this one will be taking we will be taking this, the AND of this one will with this 0, okay, for the first element, because this is like a cyclic shift. So for this one we'll have a and 0. For the next one we'll have 0 and 1. For the next one we'll have 1 and 1. For the next one we'll have 1 and 0. 1 and 0. And for next one we'll have 0 and 1. Okay, so this will be something like 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0. Now again, this is just one operation after that, and all of this will become 0. So for every one, can you see, all you need to check is the farthest, I mean, is the closest 0. If this is the closest 0, then what this means is that this one can be converted to a 0 in 2 steps. So you look for all these ones and you take the maximum of these max steps to convert any one to a 0. Okay, you find out this for all the ones that are present and you add this. Okay, you consider this max element, max value. So these are the number of steps that are definitely required for this one particular group. Okay, and you find this for all the groups. Take the max of max value of all. Okay. So I know it is a little hard to understand, and this is not a very easy problem. But yeah, there are and also, like, after you're done with n divided by GCD of n by n comma d steps, you can just leave it. You don't have to worry about anything else.
Yeah, I did something like I used graph in this. So what I did was, for all zeros in the array, I created the next pointer where it will land, and then I ran a multi-source BFS from all zeros.
Oh, right. Amazing. That is even better.
And then
so,
if any distance is greater than infinity, so it will be -1.
that is just amazing. That is much better than this approach. So in this approach, there is not much. I just need to keep track of certain pointers. But the approach that you're talking about, you just formed these groups and converted them to graphs. Now you ran a multi-source BFS with all these zeros, so, which is amazing, which is great. That is a totally fine approach. But you can do this even without using multi-source BFS. But why don't these guys have graph as the tag here?
I think they had your solution in the mind. They had your solution in the mind.
Okay, let's add graph here. Yeah. So I've added graphs here. Cool. So yeah, let me just show you my solution for this. This is the part where I implemented it. Now these are the paths. I mean, I have named them as paths. So what I'm doing is I'm just checking that I'm iterating on all these values. I'm checking if this value has been encountered ever before or not. And if not, I'm just running this for loop. which is like n running for n divided by GCD of n by d steps. Now again, it is very important to understand that this part is not required. This n divided by GCD of n comma d is not required. Why? Because you can always maintain a set which tells you that you have encountered this element before or not. Okay, so this is not required, although I've explained it, but this is not required, right? And after that, it is very simple. I'm just keeping track of the farthest, I mean, this closest 0 to everyone, and I'm just updating it like this. Answer here equals to max of answer here, previous answer. And also another important thing here to note here is that, you know, this whole group is cyclic. It is not like a single 1D array. It is a cyclic array. So in order to, you know, convert it into a 1D array, you can append this whole array on itself. Like this is a very common trick that you can use. In order to convert a cyclic array to a single 1D array, you can add this whole array to itself and just treat it like the single 1D array. Right, so I hope this is clear to all of you. And yeah, we're done with all these problems. We haven't discussed problem G, and yeah, if anybody has done it, I would be happy to know how you did it. So yeah, should we end this whole session? Are you guys okay with it?
Galen Colin suggested a solution for G2.
Okay, cool. So maybe people who who are looking for solutions to problem G, they can refer to Galen Colin's videos. Galen Colin's recent video.
I asked him the solution and he texted it to me. I forwarded it to you.
Oh, okay. So let's see. Okay, so this is something that I did. I also did it for 2000. I think you guys can see this in my screencast. The answer, I mean, if you want to look at the maximum limits that you can go to, you would never want to go 2000 towards the left or 2000 towards the right. Okay. So max answer is 2, 3. Okay, this is not a solution. Okay, I mean, I also knew that this is based on DP, but I had no state or transition in mind, right? So yeah, I was trying out some random greedy stuff. I mean, as soon as I saw the question, I knew it was DP, but again, I was trying out some random greedy stuff. But yeah, yeah, I mean, that is it for this whole session. I hope you all had a fun. I mean, I hope you all had a great time. So yeah, I think I will be ending it now. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, good night.
Yeah, good night. Bye. So.